Yes. Okay. Today we have Ngöndro post Zoom session and the lesson 21. So let me remove this. The lesson 21 is talk about the 5 circumstantial advantages, and we're talking about the number 4 and the number 5, which is having the Dharma door open for us and a compassionate teacher to accept us. Now, before we start, we always remember the 3 supreme methods. First is preparation, the top here, arousing bodhicitta. And second is main practice. The original meaning is to be free from clinging and concept. And since this is difficult to attain, what we can do is concentrating without distraction. And third one is at the end, conclusion, dedicate marriage. So if we arouse in bodhicitta, we practice become a source of marriage. And when we maintain a concentrated mind, the marriage cannot be destroyed. And then by dedicating marriage continues to grow until we attain enlightenment. So with this mindset, let's arouse bodhicitta. There's two aspects, arouse bodhicitta to attain benefit, Buddhahood for the benefit of sentient beings. And also we cultivate the pure view of the Vajrayana. We regard everything as pure. For instance, we can imagine ourselves in the Buddha land Sukhavati, and we are in a hall, a study hall, or a place that's in the presence of Buddha Amitabha. So with this mindset, we could start chanting our refuge and general bodhicitta. I would suggest everybody open your mind and let's put our palm together. Let's chant all together. Okay? If you wish, just put your palm to just like every day you do your homework. Yeah. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so forth, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practicing generosity and so forth, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly, I take refuge until I attain enlightenment. Through the merit of practice, generosity, and so forth, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all beings. Next comes generally bodhicitta, and this is a special method of general bodhicitta according to the result of mantrayana, means the result mantrayana. I and other sentient beings, infinite in number, have always been Buddhas from the very beginning. In acknowledgement that this is how things are, I generate the mind of supreme awakening. I and other sentient beings, infinite in number, have always been Buddhas from the very beginning. In acknowledgement that this is how things are, I generate the mind of supreme awakening. I and other sentient beings, infinite in number, have always been Buddhas from the very beginning. In acknowledgement that this is how things are, I generate the mind of supreme awakening. 7-line prayer. 愿业行路扬赞，白马给萨东波拉，扬赞就古努苏尼，白马就那些苏扎，国土看多芒波古，给给给这大的吉，现在垃圾些苏州，不如白马西的红。愿业行路扬赞，白马给萨东波拉。扬赞就古苏尼，白马就那些苏扎。国土广东芒波国，给给给这大的吉，现在拉西些苏州，不如陪马西的红。今夜吉怒江山，白马给萨东波浪，扬山就古祝你，白马就那些苏扎。 我如刚都梦不够，给这大的情，现在那一切所做，不如开满西的红。Home in the northwest of the land of Diana, in the heart of the lotus flower, endowed with the most marvelous attainment. You are renowned as a lotus born, surrounded by many hosts of darkness. Following your footsteps, I pray, come, inspire me with their blessings. Guru Pema Siddhi Home. When you pray, His Holiness Jimmy Pongsa Rinpoche. In the pure realm of the great sacred site, the five-peaked mountain, the blessings of Manjusri's wisdom ripen in your mind. Jimmy Ponto Rinpoche at your feet I pray. Inspire me with a blessing. Transmit the realization of the wisdom mind. Homage to the teacher Buddha Shakyamuni. Homage to the wisdom warrior Manjusri. Homage to the entire loving lineage masters. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to meet for hundreds and thousands million eons. Now that I get a chance to see, hear, receive, and practice it, I understand the ultimate meaning of the Tathagata. In order to benefit all sentient beings, may we all generate supreme bodhicitta. So we are studying the words of my perfect teacher, and with Campbell's teachings on other preliminaries. The words of my perfect teacher have three main content. The first one, ordinary or external preliminaries, and the second, extraordinary internal preliminaries, such as attack and refuge and Vajrasattva practice, so forth. The third one is switch way of transference, means we transfer our consciousness to the Pure Land Sukhavati. So in the first 13 lessons, we spend our time just not even talking the teaching yet. It just prepare us how to the proper way to listen to the Dharma. 13 lessons, including what to avoid and what is said. Now we are in the first one is that the real opportunity having freedom advantages. Okay, so there's 13 lessons covered it. So the first one is this one contains the friction natural freedom and the reflection advantage related Dharma. So this first one is age freedom, and second one is in two parts. The first one is the 5 individual advantages, and next 5 circumstantial advantages. It means that these advantages require our others to accomplish. Okay, advantage sometimes is called endowment. So we are studying the 5 circumstantial advantages now. Just to remember what is the 8 freedoms, also called 8 and free state. It is a state that prevents us from studying Dharma. So from the 8, because roughly divided in 2 parts, so non-humans, excuse me. So we are not born in the hell realm as a preta, as animals, or as a long-lived God. Okay, even we born as a human, if, excuse me, we're not born in uncivilized land, so-called borderland, and also we're not born with incomplete faculties, and we don't have wrong views, and when the time the Buddha no appears. So we have this 8 free from this and free state. And just to review what is in the other 5 individual advantages. The advantage of being human existence, the advantage of sense faculties, the advantage of place, the advantage of good lifestyle, means we are not involved in conflicting harmful karma. Advantage of the faith. Most important of 5 is the have faith from these individual advantages. The 5 circumstantial advantages talk about a Buddha has appeared. It's extremely rare. I think you all remember the Buddha is one of the 3 Buddhas that were propagate Vajrayana. So we are lucky to be able to listen to the Buddha, especially we can hear the Vajrayana. And second, the Buddha has preached. The Buddha can be born, but he just ended up, saying just solitude, but he turned the wheel 3 times, turned the Dharma in 9 levels. I think Dharma brother Christina explained this very well last time. And his teaching still exists, means it's available, it's not destroyed yet. So today we are discussing the 4th one. The Buddha teaching can be followed. Okay, so condition allow us to enter the Dharma door, and this we need others to provide this condition. So it's called circumstantial advantages. And then the 5th one is someone are kind toward others, means someone already realized master, they not hold them good things themselves, but they are willing to teach. So teachers are available. This is what we're discussing today. So when you look up the different textbook or whatever, actually the 4th circumstantial adventure has many different names, and not like the first 3. Okay, such as the Dharma door is free for us to enter. The Dharma can still be followed. The teachings are practiced, so people are still teaching, and they're followers of the teachings. Okay, and one of them also even included there are community practice like what we are doing. So we could think of our Ngöndro group is also a good circumstantial advantage for us to practice. So this is one of the names, many names here. So here, what we want to study is first, the Dharma door is to open. How do we enter that? So here's we'll read the text, and while you're reading the text, thinking about why is it extremely important to enter, that we enter the Dharma door or to enter the Buddhist path? And then we'll cover the other topic later on. So we study the teaching now. This the first one is a relatively short one. Can can read. Maybe Elaine, can you read first? Can you open?
Okay. The circumstance advantages.
Excuse me. Here we go.
The Buddha's teaching can be followed. Although we now have the advantages, a Buddha has appeared and has expounded the Dhamma, and his teaching still exists. The key is the 4th advantage, that we must follow the Buddha's teaching. If you have enough renunciation and other favorable conditions, you may take ordination. If you do not, you should uphold all, or at least part of the five precepts. On this basis, you hear, contemplate and meditate on the Dhamma, which qualifies you as a Buddhist. If you don't enter the Dhamma, even if the Dhamma still exists, you cannot receive the doctrine of transmission and the doctrine of realization. If you don't receive the doctrines and the immense wisdom and the great compassion in the Dhamma have no possibility of infiltrating you. The problem is similar to this. There is a good neighborhood school, and often who want to attend this school will be admitted. However, the orphan may not want education and prefers to wander outside, thinking he's living a free and a happy life. Similarly, if we do not embark on the path of the Dhamma, no matter how thriving the Dhamma may be, it will not bring us any benefit. This is just as the rising sun can hardly have any impact on the blind man, and as the water of a large lake cannot quench the thirst of a traveler who has reached his soul but choose not to drink from it. Although we have the opportunity in this life to have entered the Dhamma, millions of people around us are still aimlessly wandering in samsara life after life. Therefore, we should generate great aspiration and try our very best to help them. Even if helping one person to generate compassion or renunciation of just 1 second, we should still devote all our effort to doing it. Of course, such as an aspiration is not something we do only once. It requires a long-term commitment. With such an inspiration, sometimes favorable conditions that allow us to benefit others may unexpectedly arise. Thus, wherever you go or live, you can always help beings with the wisdom of the Dharma, and bring fortune being to enter the Dharma through various methods. Bringing status and wealth to others is not a true benefit, whereas bringing Dharma to them is of great meaning for their present and future lives. Therefore, it is crucial to guide ourselves and others onto the Dharma path.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. So, while you're reading, do you think about why it's extremely important that we enter Dharma door, Buddha's path?
Although we now have the advantages, Buddha has appeared and has expounded the Dharma, and his teaching still exists. The key is the four advantages that we must follow the Buddha's teaching. If you have sufficient renunciation and meet other favorable conditions, you may be eligible for ordination. If you do not, you should uphold all or at least part of the 5 lay precepts. On this basis, you hear, contemplate, and meditate on the Dharma. If you don't enter the Dharma, even if the Dharma still exists, you cannot receive the doctrine of transmission and realization. If you don't receive the teaching, the immense wisdom and the great compassion in the Dharma cannot infiltrate you. Metaphors, and often living next to a good neighborhood school, but does not want an education. A blind man cannot see the rising sun. A traveler next to a lake dies of thirst.
Okay, thank you very much. I think everybody get a good impression why it is important to enter the Buddha's path. I like this metaphor, especially it's get a vivid description why we should enter Dharma door. Otherwise, especially the blind man, also a traveler next to lake died of thirst. Does anybody have any comment why it's extremely important to enter the Buddha path? Here in the text, I highlighted some places, such as if we are layperson, we should observe the 5 precepts. I guess everybody understand what why precept is for layperson. I just a little summary here. I think we should be aware. Buddha says that the first one is abstain from taking life, is because like we don't kill. Okay, maybe eat a little mosquito or so forth. But we try our best. And second one is to refrain from taking what is not given. There's a very skilled way of saying that. Basically, it says do not steal. But if something is not given to us, if we take it, it's a way of stealing. And the third one is refrain from sexual misconduct. And the fourth one is abstain from lying, means telling the truth. Otherwise, our nose become longer and longer. And the fifth one is abstain from intoxication. I think there is another sentence, and it's that you become like totally heedless. You lost your mind, like here. Okay, so this I think on our website we have some discussion about intoxicated drink, so forth. So this we should at least know what is the 5 precept we should try to observe. Another thing that you mentioned that we cannot be benefit from the doctrine of Dharma or the doctrine of transmission and the Dharma realization. And this is actually the main part of what the Dharma means. Okay, the Dharma transmission means the teachings, the Buddhist teachings and texts that have been passed through generations, including scriptures, oral instructions, rituals, and liturgies. Okay, so all the words or written words. And the Dharma realization is the direct experience and inner realization that arises from practicing Dharma. This includes genuine renunciation, bodhicitta, the wisdom of emptiness, meditative absorption, insight, and also realize our Buddha nature. So both of these are essential. Transmission provides a path, and realization is the journey. So we have always keep in mind, when we study the Dharma, it has two parts. Not just listening or reading the text, we also need to gain the Dharma realization. These two is like, they always say, it's like two wings of the birds, okay? So at this moment, you could ask ourselves, have I reasoned a genuine renunciation? And how's my bodhicitta? And the wisdom emptiness, I think is very important. We could develop, we'll discuss maybe later on, but we could train ourselves at meditative absorption and so forth. So we also keep it in mind. And in text also are like helping others. Millions of people around have not entered the Dharma. And I think it's especially here, even if in helping one person to generate compassion renunciation for just 1 second, we should still devote ourselves to do it. So that's, I think this is what also Campbell's aspiration. There's for life after life, he would do that all the time. Okay, so anybody, any other question or point to reflection up here? Okay. If not, we could move to the reading text too. This talk about a different kind of Buddhist tradition. Anna, could you read it?
Sure.
Yeah, just a minute. Let me move this on. Okay, text reading too.
There are two kinds of Buddhist. One is the approximate Buddhist, which equals to pseudo-Buddhist, and the other is the genuine Buddhist. The approximate Buddhist. Number one, Dharma is a protection against fears. Some of you may enter the Dharma not in pursuit of liberation, but for the sake of antidoting negative life situations such as relationship breakup, severe illness, poverty, disasters, or feeling utterly lost. Or it is out of fear of falling into the lower realms in the next life. In the first case, it is due to concern for present-day adversity, and in the second, it is due to fear of a future suffering. Since your motivation is not for liberation, even if you've entered the Dharma and received the refugee certificate, quote unquote, from a temple of a guru or a guru, the Dharma you receive is just used to protect you against the fears, and you are not yet on the right path. I have noticed many taxi drivers hang a pendant of Avalokiteshvara or Buddha Shakyamuni in their cars. So sometimes I ask the taxi driver, why are you hanging this? He often replies, because I'm afraid of having a car accident, this pendant can protect me. Sometimes I also ask, are you a Buddhist? Yes, he replies. Why did you take refuge in Buddhism? Because a fortune teller told me I wouldn't live long, so I took refuge for living longer. In the In the short run, this is, of course, a skillful way for him to enter the Dharma, but ultimately seeking protection is not the right reason for taking refuge. Number 2, Dharma is a quest for excellence. The pursuit of a Dharma solely for the purpose of getting food, clothes, and so on in this life, or to secure a favorable rebirth as a celestial being or a human in the next life, is called Dharma as quest for excellence. As such, even if you've entered the Dharma, you are not yet on the right path. Nevertheless, Buddha Shakyamuni was not against the temporary quest for excellence, because for beings with strong desires, one can first fulfill their desires, then eventually guide them onto the path of liberation. The Vimalakirti Sutra says, first he catches them with a hook of desire, then he leads them into the Buddha way. However, many people are hooked by desires but haven't yet connected with the Buddha's wisdom throughout their entire lives. A person told me, "Dear teacher, I prioritize the peace and safety of my family. I have 2 kids. I hope the older one marries well and the younger one excels at university. I hope I am safe and sound as well. I hope my wife, who is in bad shape, becomes healthier. I hope my parents-in-law stop their quarrels and that my parents are well. Other than this, I ask for nothing. Namo Amitabha." I told him, it is fine that you wish for these things, but still you have to think about liberation, which is much more important. But he responded, no, 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 being safe and sound is enough for me. Liberation is beyond my quest. People who share the same attitude of mind haven't really taken refuge in Buddhism. The genuine Buddhist, only those who truly understand that the whole of samsara has no meaning and the 6 realms are as terrifying as a burning house, a land of demons, or a forest of swords, and who strives to seek liberation for themselves and others by embracing Buddhism, are the genuine Buddhists. We should all reflect on this and check whether we are. With the Guru's blessing and kindness, many people have gained good intellectual understanding, although their experiential understanding varies. Of the 6 realms, no one wants rebirth in the 3 lower realms, which is the hells, pretas, and the animals. Meanwhile, we should not pursue rebirth in the 3 higher realms either, which is born as humans, the asuras, and the gods. Worldly people often say, if there is an afterlife, I would this and that, treating the afterlife merely as a hypothetical. In contrast, as practitioners, we should reflect in this way. If I fail to attain liberation in this life, I must continue my practice in the lives to come. The aspiration to be reborn in the pure realm of Sukhavati expresses this clearly. To attain the pure realm of Sukhavati from the inescapable ocean of samsara is like being liberated from a prison of great evil. May I not look back toward samsara. Those who sincerely reflect in this way can be considered true Buddhists. On the other hand, if one is driven solely by the 8 worldly concerns and shows no genuine yearning for liberation, then even if they are ordained, wearing kasayas, shaving their heads, residing in monasteries, and living off the offerings of the faithful, they cannot be regarded as authentic Buddhists. This holds even more so for householders. Of course, it is difficult for ordinary people to sustain unwavering renunciation at all times. But at the very least, we should occasionally arouse a sincere longing for liberation and clearly recognize that there is nothing in samsara ultimately worth clinging to. If we've never thought about being liberated from samsara since we entered the Dharma, then we are definitely not a genuine Buddhist.
Okay, thank you so much. This is a long reading.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we cover all the different types of Buddhists. So, First one about the Buddhists, I think the original text is translated as Shudo Buddhist. I think Shudo has a sort of connotation of denigrating and so forth. Because I myself been helping to translate. I try to play with words. Actually, in the Chinese, where is it? 是相似佛教 means close, very similar, but didn't say you are, should one and so forth. So I looked up the word. It looks like approximate. It's maybe closer to the meaning. So I use the word approximate. Okay, so there are two kinds of Buddhists. If we use approximate Buddhist and genuine Buddhist. So Anna, do you get some idea what is this two Buddhist? Why is it called approximate or pseudo Buddhist?
Well, the intention to be the Buddhist is for having a better life in samsara. They are called the pseudo Buddhists, and genuine Buddhists are who want to renunciate from the rebirth in samsara at all. That was the overall impression I got. So pseudo Buddhist, they have a hope and fear of either like hope for the good luck and fear for the bad luck, and they want the life situation, this life situation, to be good, and they are not really interested in liberation. So what you wrote is Dharma is a protection against fear, worry about adverse conditions in this life, fear the sufferings of the three lower realms of in future lives. And Dharma is a quest for excellence, for better luck, hope for abundance and happiness in this life, and for a divine or human rebirth in the next life.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, thank you. Nim, you have something to say? Please go ahead.
Yeah, look, pseudo-Buddhist to me sounds like that they're trying to make samsara a little bit better.
Okay. Yes, so it means you could say that could we belong to the second one as a quest for excellence? Okay, excellence. Sometimes you think doing something real good, but this is a real vision for better luck or a better life. Okay, so if we could say that's, but I think also even like Buddha Shakyamuni is not against all this because this is many people start from here. Many people enter Buddhism, for many different reasons. But at least they have some connection seed built in them when they see the get in contact with Buddhism. They wish to be protected. I think this is a very natural way to do it. And I think also Buddha Shakyamuni does not say this is not the right way, but this is the entrance way. After entering that, like, the hook them first with desire, and then after them, lead them Buddhist way. I think even for myself, I think I thought, when I was little, I always, my parents always bring me to the temple, at least to pray for good grade. And so I really believe in that at that time. Okay, so I think, and then we have some reference because they have such power. So we entered the Buddhist path. It's nothing wrong to enter this way, but not staying there. We have to transcend it. I think that's what we could call them as pseudo Buddhists. But also, you say they are similar, similar Buddhists. They walk in a Buddha path, but it's still at the beginning stage. Do you have any other thing to add up to this? Yeah. So we could ask ourselves, what kind of Buddhists are we? And I think it's nothing wrong to admit we want to protection, and because that's why we pray. Tara, Guru Rinpoche, help us when confused and so forth. Although you could say we are praying and we are praying our inner Buddha nature to let our own wisdom manifest, because we make an external gestures that will reflect to our inner self to reveal our own inner wisdom. that's what is a so-called skill way to let us connect to our own Buddha nature with outer image. Okay, so I think this is a good way to start, and nothing to denigrate it, but we should try to transcend it. And but it's good to have some example. Should realize being to follow their example, and then they always make the wish that to liberate sentient being, to help sentient beings. So if we pray to them, we make connection, they will respond. So I think that's build up the connection and then lead us to advance more. That's the purpose of here to start with. So anybody had anything else to this way? Another thing that you see mentioned in there on the text is kashakas. Okay, this I think is the Sanskrit words. Kashaka is the outer vestment worn by ordained Buddhist monks. So you can see there's different kinds. But they originally, traditional, they were robes made by sewing together discarded cloth or rags collected from charnel ground, the rub up the dead people, or rubbish, the garbages. So like this one is very like patched together, and because they look like, I don't know if from Asia you always see the rice field, they like different squares. So also it's a kashaka in Chinese actually is a field of merit, okay? And then the patchwork garment resembles the layout of rice field. They also symbolize that the monastic community is a fertile field of merit, from which if we plant merit, it will ripen into spiritual benefit for oneself and others. And that's also encourage us to make offerings to the Sangha members. And because they are a great field merit, it's a fertile land, and we could plant our seeds in on the rock, they will never grow. And it's from very filled with the sand and so forth, they won't grow well. But in contrast, sanghas, wherever the rare these monastic robes, they are the fertile field of merit. That's one word I look it up. I don't understand what was it. Okay. So next one, we come to the genuine Buddhists. What are considered to be genuine Buddhists? Anybody has any thing to say to you when you're reading what you understand? Okay, Ellen, would you like? Let me see. What else? Who else can read it? Julian, would you say something about what is genuine Buddhist?
I think in my understanding, I guess genuine, having the right intention and aim, having the aim to liberate oneself and other beings from the ocean of samsara, not just to kind of wish for a better birth in the lands of in heaven. Obviously nirvana is at the above all of the realms of heaven, and so the problem is the problems in the lands of heaven are still the same. It's still samsara. So whether if we're aiming to just have a better life in on earth, or be born in the lands of heaven to kind of still live in the sense world, is still not the ultimate kind of aim that we should have. And so my understanding from the text is that to be a genuine Buddhist means to want to to cultivate the kind of the disenchantment with samsara and all of the realms of samsara, and to aim to practice to achieve liberation, and achieve enlightenment and liberation, and not just for oneself, but for all living beings, because that your suffering is this suffering that other people have, and so it's aiming to liberate everyone and yourself from samsara. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Here, Campbell says that the whole samsara has no meaning, and the 6 realms are as terrifying as the burning house, a land of demons, and the forest swords. These are very, very strong words. Maybe we could say this, for the hell realms, but, for a human, we think the life is still very good. We don't realize it's the burning house, a land of demons, or forest sword. I think for this realization, so-called renunciation, but we still have to live in this world and carry out what must be done, not deserve, just not do anything and just shut yourself up. That's another extreme we should avoid also. Yeah. But of course, like Julian said, we also have to, we have our motivation, like we met from the beginning. We want to attain perfect Buddhahood for the benefit of others. That's genuine Buddhist in a way. Yeah, thank you. So, am I genuine Buddhist? Campbell have give us a way out, a little bit encouragement here. It is difficult for ordinary person like us or like me to always remain renunciation and never let it regress. But we should at least occasionally wish for revelation and understand that there's nothing worth pursuing in samsara. I think Nim, you share with me a video that I really impressed. Maybe you could post in on the group chat. It's talk about person, a girl's life, from beginning to the end. It's just like, and we could. It's sad at the end, but it's also that's how true samsara is. That we just repeating once and once again, one over and over again. So I also we should make a respiration here. I think that he was here. I delivered from prison of great evil. So all the prisoner want to escape from the prison. So we should think samsara as prison. Although you might think we have something to enjoy, at least we have met the Dharma. That's the most important thing. I also look up a little bit difference between approximate Buddhists. You can see, the approximate visit temples only during festivals, make offerings for just good luck, meditate for relieve stress, and study Dharma superficially without deep contemplation, and follow precept inconsistently, and attach to samsara happiness. So we could check if we are this catalog. And genuine Buddhists develop insight to understand the true nature of samsara, and cultivate a sense of urgency to practice. That's also very important, that we should practice like our hair on fire, and study Dharma regularly with proper guidance, associate with spiritual friends who are serious practitioners, and maintain a consistent practice, meditation practice, and understand samsara happiness is ultimately unsatisfactory. Okay, the Buddha pointed out very clearly that we have all these, birth, aging, death, and sickness, and so forth. The 8 disaffections. Okay. Another question is, if many people around you are nominal Buddhists or approximate Buddhists or pseudo Buddhists, how do you plan to guide them properly? Anybody had any suggestion here? I think also we depend on conditions. Okay, I think different people have different propensity, and we should approach slowly, because Buddha Japanese was not against temporary quests for better life, and for beings with the wanted desires, try to satisfy them first and then guide them onto the path of liberation. Okay, like what Vimalakirti Sutra says. First, he catches them with the hook of desire, and then he lead them onto the Buddhist way. I think we just have to be very skillful in this aspect. Okay, So we are doing pretty good. Anybody, what do you do with your family? Are your family member Buddhist? If not, what do you do with them? Or your best friend, so forth? Do you try to convince them or lead them then because as a Campbell said, even lead them to arouse 1 second of any renunciation and bodhicitta, that's what doing it. What do you do from your own experience? Anyone want to share?
I want to share with my mother. She's not very like persistent learning the Buddha Dhamma, but I think I was trying to help her to listen more teachings with from Kampo. It's like some Subhawat, like Pure Land teachings. Try to because she's old, she's not able to like us to every week to extensive learning. But I think everyone has their the way to be out, like to build the confidence from Amitabha. That's like and read Amitabha Sutra and the Avalokiteshvara mantra, and try to from their way to try to reach the like in the future try to go to the Pure Land. That's yeah. Thank you. That's why I want to share.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think it's very important to make whatever connection we can make. I think also Campbell always mentioned if we see little insect and so forth, we could just say Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and so forth, make somehow there's a fall in their consciousness and might awaken some other time. And I think myself, I mentioned that I entered Buddhism because I'm doing Qigong. Anyway, so there are some friends in the north here in eastern United States, a very big Buddhist temple called the Zhongyan Monastery. And whenever they go there, they will ask me if I want to go, so I got to go there. And there's a really Avarachana Buddha statue. And I was impressed with the atmosphere and so on and so forth. So that really helped me there, and their own behavior tell me, do you have something in them that's different? So with our personal influence, what we say and doing, and then if there is some occasion, Dharma festival, whatever, try to bring them along and so forth, that slowly make a connection, and that one day might mature. Of course, we have to consider, and then Campbell said this is not just off and on, or just like we need a long-term commitment, but we try to catch every opportunity if there is a chance to plant a seed in a being's mind. That is according even to the Diamond Sutra, that we offer so many money material things to other people. It's not cannot be compared to lead people on the Buddha's path. Yeah, so we obviously keep in mind now that we have the chance to admit it. Yeah. So now we move to the second one, is the 5 circumstantial advantages. Remember, the first one is the Buddha appeared. He has turned the wheels, Dharma wheel 3 times. The teaching still exists, and teaching can be followed. I mean, so there is people still practicing, we can connect with and enter the Buddha path. And the 5th one is some are kind-hearted toward others and share the teachings. And interestingly, this one also has many different translations. Also, it says we have been accepted by a teacher and so forth. So there's a different way of put it. I'm just so we're going to start text reading 3. And when you read it, keep this in mind. Why is the guidance and support of spirit teacher so crucial in the process of studying and practicing the Dharma? So, let's see. Choying, could you read this?
Of course, thank you. The fifth circumstantial advantage. There are those who are kind-hearted toward others and share the teachings. Some people have received a refill certificate or have joined a Buddhist study group. However, without being accepted by a qualified teacher, they still know little about the Dharma and may still be the same as their previous selves because the Dharma hasn't substantially benefited them. Therefore, the condensed transcendent wisdom says the Dharma depends on the spiritual teacher. Thus said the Buddha, the supreme embodiment of all good qualities. The Perfection of Wisdom Sutra in 8,000 lines also says, if a Bodhisattva Mahasattva wishes to attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete enlightenment, they must first rely on and respectfully serve a spiritual teacher. The Flower Garland Sutra says, if there is no one to explain the Dharma, even the wisest cannot comprehend it. Without a spiritual teacher to explain the Dharma, no matter how intelligent or wise someone may be, they will not be able to understand it through their own efforts alone. Why? Because the Buddha's teachings are vast, with numerous transmissions covering a wide range of topics. For instance, the Tibetan Tipitaka contains over 100 volumes of sutras, and in the Kangju, and over 2,000 or over 200 volumes of Shastra in the Tenju. In addition, there are also numerous works by the great Tibetan masters, and some masters also have written nearly 100 volumes. At first glance, at these Buddhist texts, a beginner may feel completely confused, unsure which one to choose, but after receiving a teacher's picked instructions, a Buddhist will know how to condense the essential points of all Buddha teachings. In a nutshell, a Mahayanist practice is to establish renunciation and bodhicitta as the foundation, and then to negating the self of persons and the self of phenomena. This summarizes the essential points of all the Buddha teachings. If you follow these points on the path, you will have a perfect practice. I often think this: had I not been accepted as a disciple by the great Jigme Punshok Rinpoche, I might not have taken ordination to be a monk. And even if I had become a monk, I would never have studied and practiced correctly. Therefore, I'm very grateful to the great Jigme Punshok Rinpoche. Therefore, neither having the Dharma on nor taking refuge is sufficient in itself. We must also be accepted by a qualified teacher. According to the Vinaya, a disciple who hasn't fully mastered the three Pitakas must follow a teacher for 10 years. Even within a secular education, Chinese students need to participate in the 9-year compulsory education. In comparison, if Dharma students don't practice in the 9-year Buddhist education, they cannot be considered true Buddhists. Not only do we need basic education in the Dharma, but more importantly, we should not depart from the teacher untimely. It is said that the Dzogchen lineage master, Vilamamitra and Janasutra, were reborn as Panditas 500 times, yet they still serve and follow their gurus for 9 and 21 years, respectively. If such great masters devoted themselves to their teachers for so long, what need is there to mention the importance of this for ordinary people like us, burdened by heavy karmic debts? Following a teacher can be demanding and exhausting at times, but we must remember that Studying the Dharma is not always easy or comfortable. Please be patient. This too is a part of the path. When Sadhana studied under Manjushri, the Bodhisattva instructed him, do not find faults in the skillful means employed by a qualified spiritual teacher. This mirrors the Vajrayana principle of maintaining pure perception toward the Guru. In another example, when Sudana visited Avalokiteshvara, he reflected, qualified spiritual teachers are Buddhas. They are the Dharma crowns of all truths. They are the treasury of all virtues. This aligns perfectly with the Tantric view that regards the Guru as a Buddha, as the root of the Dharma, and as the source of all virtues. Therefore, the emphasis on Guru devotion is not exclusive to Vajrayana. It is a central element of Dharma practice across traditions. To attain the highest state of enlightenment, following a Guru is indispensable. A practitioner can only benefit from the following Guru for a sufficient long time.
Thank you very much.
Sufficient long time.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So coming back to the question, why is the guidance or support of spiritual teachers so crucial in the process of studying Dharma? When you read it, what struck you the most that you still think
Yeah, for me, there's 3 points. The first one is because the Buddha teaching is vast, so even you are intelligent person, you might not be able to deal with the vast amount of information on your own. So you need some guidance. And then second point, some teaching are not straightforward. I think like especially tantric, which is employ us a lot of symbolic language. So you definitely need a guru. And third point is that even when some panditas, like now, for example, the Vilamamitra and Jana Sutra, who are great Dzogchen master who attain a high realization, even for them, they also chose that they need to practice with the guru, to study under guru, even they are such a high caliber masters. And I think add to that point is that you should not leave the guru prematurely. You need to get maybe some paid instruction from the guru that now you are qualified to practice on your own. To that point, then you can leave.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, indeed, you already mentioned a crucial point, which is the teaching is so vast. I think Campbell mentioned that when he went in the bookstore, there's just like lines after line shelves after shelves on the Buddhist book. You don't know where to go. Okay, and even pick up, you might not understand the meaning either. So we need a spiritual teacher, guidance. And here we have Campbell, master like Campbell, you themselves are already learned, but they are very generous over in the teaching, provide all the conditions, materials for us to study. So, and also said Campbell is his own experience that without his guru, Jima Phuntsal Rinpoche, he might not even consider to take a refuge to be a Buddhist. Yeah. Okay. And then even after taking refuge, we have been going nowhere because there's no teacher. We cannot understand Dharma on our own. Okay. So there's already many scripture citations, which is, I think, it's a very strong support why we should follow teacher. I think the most heavily often quoted one is the last one from the Flower Garden Sutra. If there's no one to explain the Dharma, even the widest cannot comprehend. So that's we should always remember. Reading Sutra may be merit by itself, but without understanding it, it's not much powerful. Okay, so thank you for joining the sharing. Yeah. And also, it pointed a salient point of what the path will tell us. I think this will be repeat later on from Atisha's story. So Mahayana prayer, the first one is general renunciation of bodhicitta. And then we should here says understand emptiness, negate the self and present the selves. This summarizes the essential point of Buddhist teachings. If we follow this point, we will have perfect peace. Okay, so these are very important, but negating the self and of person and self phenomenon, which is understand empty. I don't think we have time to discuss. Maybe over time we should, if people have some experience and want their own practice, we would like to hear them to share this point. Okay. Anybody have any more to add on this point? Why it is essential, or let me see this question here. Why is the guidance support of spiritual teachers so crucial in the process of studying and practice Dharma, especially in the beginning, or in the beginning, in the middle, at the end, actually, every spell. Anyone else add more on your thought? What do you have add more to add?
I want to add one thing from the guidance, like a spiritual teacher, like a Kampo, right? I always, when I read the text, not it's a very superficial, because only our conceptual mind understanding. But when Kampo teaching them the text, even we read this text, then I always find like we have understand more deep and more for the all the words connected together. It's kind of give me a different angle to thinking this way. I think only like the spiritual teacher with certain realization can give our teaching. It's like the study we are doing now, right? It's like when we read it, we really like feel it, not the ordinary text. It's very powerful. Every time I read it. Thank you. Just want to share.
Yeah, exactly. I think actually they said, the words of my perfect teacher, the words is so simple, it's just totally neglect, oh, I read it, this is so simple, I understand all of them. And then someone cannot imagine that Campbell so that he spent 140 lessons on it. And then people say, oh, I know this. Why do they repeat it back and forth, back and forth? It's really, I think someone might think of this, same topic you discuss here and there. But every time we read a text, we get some deeper insight. And I think Campbell Sology really guide us well. So we should tell ourselves to be patient. Yes, Nim, please. Debbie, please.
I was just going to add on to Christina's point that
Yes.
even when you listen to the teaching, sometimes you have clarifying questions, and you do need somebody who has experience in certain realizations to be able to answer those questions. So it's not like you can go to a regular Dharma friend to answer certain questions that will arise, especially when you think about your meditative realizations. So I think if we don't have gurus or teachers who have practiced and who are certain levels of realizations, then it's hard for us to progress beyond certain points.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned meditation, that's even more crucial to have a guidance. And for that, because we might just immerse in the bliss and in the Dharma bliss, and we forgot that's not the real I am. Yeah, thank you for pointing
Yeah.
out. Very important, yes. So. It says it's extremely difficult to study Dharma on your own because it's totally different. What we learn from the kindergarten on is worldly knowledge, to be the best, to be the others, and so just nothing to do with the Dharma. Okay, so here I think also in So first we have to rely on the teacher. Be grateful. Yeah, it's just to be thankful that we have this opportunity. Because Campbell say if we had not been accepted as disciple, then he might not take an ordination or become a monk. And if he become a monk, he wouldn't know how to study. He's be very grateful. That sense of gratitude is very important to not for Dharma, for everything, life in this living. And second thing is long-term reliance. And in Vinaya, is mentioned, disciple follow teacher for 10 years. And even the great masters, Vimana Mitra and so forth, Jana Sutta served their guru, follow their guru 9 and 21 years. Okay? Even for secular education, we need to at least 9 years. Then college and graduate school and postdoctor, whatever. It's just a long, long path. Again, then we just say, oh, 1 week for study, none of it's over. And that's not the case, okay? Another thing is very important to maintain a pure perception of the guru. Do not find fault with guru. Or even there's guru, we should not keep on picking it. It depends because it's also our own judgment, okay? And in tantric teaching, we have to see the guru as the Buddha, as the root of Dharma, and as a source of virtues. Both actually in sutra teaching also have similar view. And Campbell cited some scripture evidence for that. Yeah. Any others have some point to add? Others would say something? So we could move to the, yes, name or Debbie, please.
No, I was just reflecting, and I think what stood out for me, and Choin already said it, is that all these great masters had gurus. So I couldn't imagine why we would think that we shouldn't have gurus or teachers.
Many people think that. I think even among my people we know, because there's everything you click on the online, everything's there, and they think, oh, they know all this and that. But there's many what is a wrong road we might path, we don't know. And then we just synthesize all the teachings and then concocted it as according our view. That's not the right way either, yes. But some people do think about it because, they like to read and collect. And also we should remember there's a Dharma of the teaching, the scripture, and also we should also include the Dharma of realization, means our own experience. That's the Buddhist, not just on words and saying, although the words on the books only. And the teacher guide us. Right now we have all the meditation guidance and to study questions, to reflect and check our own understanding and so forth. So not treat it as word and knowledge. And even word and knowledge, we need an expert to teach you how to make a table, how to play piano, how to play tennis and so forth. So let alone Dharma. And I don't think Dharma is the highest. If we can get such a perspective, then we will respect teacher and treasure of opportunity. Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else want to add more? Okay, what have you done in the past? What are your intention to go forward? Yeah, anybody to share what your experience to following the teacher and how you intention to go forward? I think in the past we may, yes, go ahead.
I will share.
Okay, please.
So I have, as many of you know, I have been following Kampasuraji for 12 years now. And unfortunately, he is not allowed to do more teaching. But as he said, that they will be, what he has taught from the words of my perfect teaching, the Bodhi Karika, what is that? The way into the Bodhisattva way, the other one. I'm also studying the other one right now. And I think I will, my plan is I'm studying Midiyamaka, what he taught. So my plan is to cover all he has taught, but even just that, I think it's going to take me at least another 10 years if I am diligent. If I'm not diligent, it may take me whole life. So he's my teacher, and he's my teacher for this lifetime. So and his teaching is there, and I just need to follow him all the way through. And just simply by follow him alone, I think I can gain like such great benefit. So it's not comparable to anything else. So that's my share. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Exactly. We have so many resources here. I myself, when I started, I just, when I began, I just, jumping from here and there, and then, oh, this is like, and that practice good. It's just like I had a fly here and there, and then I found La Longa, very step-by-step teaching, and then has so many materials, and I love reading, and there was books, the teaching all has a transcript. We could read it and then listen, and there are discussion, and there's like a faster, and they also give us a further explanation. So all the resources here, and here I think it's already well-traveled path. Just as the Campbell pointed out here, following a teacher can be demanding and exhausting at times, okay? So we must remember that studying drama is not always easy or comfortable. Please be patient. These two is part of path, okay? So just we should always encourage each other to be steadfast in our process, okay? So Rasna, we come to the last part of reading text 4 and 5 from starting dialogue between the Venerable Atisha and two disciples, three disciples, or maybe three, right? Two. Okay, maybe there's three. I don't know why I read two. Okay, anyway, so let's read about the text about Atisha and disciples, and this is very close to us, and recently who's been reading? Julia, have you read before? Julia?
I have not read.
You read already?
Sorry.
You haven't read yet, right? Yeah.
No, I haven't read.
Yeah. Could you read
I'm
this?
happy to. So here is a story about Venerable Atisha, which explains the importance of receiving a guru's teaching and being taken under their care. When Atisha was in India, Tara appeared to him vividly in a dream and told him, I hope you can go to the snow land as soon as possible. Your three main disciples, who had an affinity with you from a previous life, are waiting for you there. They are emanations of the three main bodhisattvas, Avalokiteshvara, Manjushri, and Vajrapani. Accepting them as disciples will help with propagating the Dharma. The three disciples were known as Kunton, Nyok, and Dromtonpa. Later, Atisha came to Tibet to spread the Dharma and connected with these three disciples. Dromtonpa asked him questions, and Atisha's answers were compiled into the text titled The Dialogues of the Lineage Master. Kunton and Nyok also asked questions, and the answers were compiled into the Dialogues of the Disciples. The great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche often quoted from these texts and told us inspiring stories about the wondrous affinity between Atisha and his three disciples. Here are some of the stories. Once, three disciples of Jo, Atisha, Ku, Nok, and Rom asked him, when it comes to attaining liberation and complete omniscience, which is more important, the canonical scriptures and their commentaries, or the teacher's oral instructions? The teacher instructions, replied Atisha. Why? Even if you can explain the entire Tripitaka from memory and possess all the knowledge of metaphysics, it is only through the teacher's practical guidance that you can surely put the teachings into practice. Without this guidance, you will inevitably become separated from the path of the Dharma. Atisha answered. Without the teacher's practical guidance, the Dharma and the practitioner will part company. With the teacher's guidance, the Dharma will permeate into the practitioner's mind, enabling them to know how to practice accordingly. So, they continued, is the essence of the teacher's instructions to uphold the three vows of individual liberation, the Bodhisattva vow and the Samaya, and to strive to do good with body, speech, and mind at all times? That is not sufficient. That is not a sufficient summary, Atisha replied. How can that be? They exclaimed. Atisha answered, you may be able to perfectly uphold the three vows, but if you haven't generated disenchantment with samsara, it just creates further causes for remaining in samsara. You may strive day and night to do good with your body, speech, and mind, but if you do not know how to dedicate the merit to perfect enlightenment, all of your merit can be completely destroyed by your wrong thoughts. Many people do not comprehend that their positive actions should be guided by bodhicitta and the merit should be dedicated in the end. Even if they have been practicing diligently, retreating, meditating, and engaging in other ascetic practices, a burst of negative thoughts and emotions can destroy the yet to be dedicated merit. Not only is the merit lost, but more negative actions are likely to be committed. In comparison, when we have the teacher's practical guidance, we will engage in good deeds with bodhicitta as a motivation and dedicate the merit in the end. It is like when you finally make some money, you will lock the cash in a safe when you are away or deposit it in a bank. Similarly, if you dedicate the merit accumulated by your good deeds, it won't be exhausted until your attainment of enlightenment. This is very important, but sadly, many people do not know this.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So what's your first your impression when you read this text about the conversations? Yes.
So from studying the dialogue between the Venerable Atisha and the two disciples, Ku and Nyok, what insights and okay, which part touched you the most and why? I think obviously this comes back to what we discussed briefly, that the Buddhist teachings are so vast that you, even if you have the most superior the most superior intellectual abilities, you will not be able to actually understand and actually put it into practice. So as Atisha said to his disciples, the teacher's instructions are the most important, because that's ultimately the instructions on how to put the teaching into practice and reap the benefits for you and other sentient beings. And yeah, I think what's kind of I think what's very, very important. And I think the other point that he made to his disciples, I'm trying to remember a little bit, is that so even if you do everything right, if you live a very good life where you do everything, you follow the precepts and you meditate and everything compatible with Buddhism, it's really important that you actually take refuge and dedicate the merit towards other sentient for the benefit of all sentient beings, because the merit can be destroyed, because we can't, I mean, as normal ordinary beings, we cannot sustain complete mindfulness and positive actions all the time. So if we don't dedicate the merit, then whenever we have kind of bad moment and we have negative thoughts, that merit can be destroyed. And so all of that effort would not be appropriately used or for our and our and other sentient being benefit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, indeed. The students think everybody, we're doing things correctly. We body, speech, and mind, culture, virtue, and hold the precept and so forth. But there is also very important that the Atisha point out. I think there's if you give 3 vows perfectly, if you don't have general discernment with some sound, disenchantment renunciation. So this is the first step. And then my is able to strike David Knight to do body, speech, and mind, but we do not dedicate marriage. So this talking about the end. And then you may possess extraordinary intelligence, whatever, but if you renounce 8 worldly concerns, but you do only be this life present. I think this is the next teaching. We are jumping at the boat a little bit ahead, but basically it's just we may think we are doing the right thing, but actually we are missing some important ingredient. So maybe we continue reading the 5th reading. Whoever has it. Zenobi Powell, would you mind to read? Are you new? Yes? No? Maybe Nim or Debbie? Can you read this?
Yeah, I can.
Yes, please.
Atisha continued, "You may possess extraordinary intelligence, pure precepts, the ability to teach, meditative insights, and more, but if you haven't renounced the 8 worldly concerns, whatever you do will only be for this present life, and you will not find the path that helps for future lives." The above analysis illustrates the importance of being taken under the care of a teacher. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we cannot generate true renunciation, which renders keeping the 3 vows of little use or liberation. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we do not know how to practice within the context of bodhicitta, which renders striving to do good of little effect. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we don't know.
Where are you?
Right here, without the teacher's pith instructions, we don't know how to practice within the context of bodhicitta, which renders striving to do good of little effect. Without the teacher's pith instructions, we don't know we should pursue liberation, which renders the results of our discipline and learning nothing but worldly blessings. However, many people don't understand this. They spend their whole lives reading numerous Buddhist texts but remain confused at the end. We should know that the key to profound pith instructions in Buddhism is only in the teacher's hands. Without the teacher opening the treasure door, you can only have a quick glance at the outside without getting the essence inside. As it is said in Shastra, to achieve complete omniscience, one must follow a qualified teacher. If only studying diligently on one's own, no one can attain Buddhahood. It's like a blind person cannot climb a high mountain all by himself. Although there are self-taught persons in the arenas of worldly knowledge and skills, becoming a self-taught practitioner is impossible in Buddhism as the teacher's pith instructions are indispensable. Attaining realization through self-guided practice is as hard as scaling the blue sky. Of course, a qualified teacher is not necessarily a person. Many people complain that they cannot find the right teacher to follow. One person even told me, "I've been searching for years, but I haven't found a suitable teacher for me." If you're unable to find the right person as your teacher, you can always consider the words of my perfect teacher as your guide, as it is considered an imperturbable instructor. Note, in the conclusion of the words of my perfect teacher, Patrul Rinpoche says, this is why this text, condensed and easy to understand, a golden exceller to soak into minute openings in narrow winds, a lamp to light up the gloom of those of feeble wits, like an imperturbable instructor, imparts the right meaning clearly on its own. While a teacher, whether of the past or present, may occasionally become upset, making it difficult to follow them, the words of my perfect teacher will never be mad at you. Therefore, you can pray to it and consult its text at any time. Some people may ask, I have higher education. Do I still need to study the basic teachings in the words of my perfect teacher? The truth is that academic degrees have little relevance when it comes to realizing the stages of spiritual development described in this text. As we read it, we should reflect deeply, word by word, line by line, and use the text as a mirror to examine ourselves. Through this process, we not only become aware of our shortcomings, but also gain clarity about how to progress on the path. The text then becomes a guiding light, illuminating the way forward. Therefore, I encourage you to reflect sincerely on this. The words of my perfect teacher is not meant to analyze the external world. It invites you to examine and transform your inner world. The above teaching has covered all the freedoms and advantages. We should carefully examine our own lives and circumstances to see which freedoms or advantages are present and which of them is not. If we find that all of them are present, we have what is known as human life endowed with the 18 freedoms and advantages. If we only possess some of them, we should appreciate what we already have and strive to attain what we do not yet have.
Okay, thank you very much. So this the end of our study. I don't know what happened to my screen. Anyway, so what the remaining part of the conversation was pretty much covered in the previous slides here. Basically, you know, we have to learn how to generate renunciation and how to dedicate marriage, and not concerned with worldly affairs such as you know to avoid fears and so forth, or wishing a better life, a better love. So this is basically covered. And in the end, it's very interesting that you mentioned that the word perfect teacher, that we should consider the word perfect teacher as our guide before we find a right teacher. And Pastor Rinpoche himself said this text is like imperturbable teacher, means they will never get mad to. Impart the right meaning clearly on its own. And then we should reflectively, word by word, line by line, and use the text and mirror to reflect ourselves, okay? And we could become aware of shortcomings and gain clarity about how to progress on the path. So I think this pretty much ended. Anyone else add more? I think at the end I attached the text. If you read it, or but this is for internal use only because it is from the Shampala's publication. But if you want the reference, I assume everybody has a copy. So just read it over as Campbell said, line by line, word by word, okay? So we have covered so far the freedoms and advantages. Again, we may think, why do we do the same thing? I mean, they seem so freedom and advantage talk the same thing. I myself these questions. Actually, the 8 freedoms means unfavorable state that make practice the Dharma impossible or extremely difficult. So this emphasis the absence obstacles. The 10 advantages is favorable conditions that empower and facilitate special spiritual practice within a precious human life. So this emphasis the presence of conducive factor. I think the Buddha teaching also always talk from this side and that side, back and forth and so forth. So they cover both ends. So this is a summary of the precious human birth, 8 freedoms. Non-human realms, we talk about 3 lower realms and long-lived God, and human obstacles, no access, wrong views, no Buddha appeared, and mental impairment. And 10 advantages, we learned individual advantages, human birth, central land, intact faculties, no extreme message, faith, and devotion, and this is the most important one. And we finish circumstantial advantages. Buddha appeared. Buddha taught the Dharma. Dharma still exists. Community practice. Here's a community practice, and supportive condition with the teacher and so forth. So I want to ask everybody: do you think you have all these 18 8 freedom and 10 advantages? You could raise your hand. Anyway, if you do, congratulations, you won the winter lottery. So we really have won the lottery and the super lottery. So congratulate ourselves, okay? And to this, let's rejoice our good luck and we could dedicate the marriage. Yeah, and Campbell, let's say, checking your life and circumstance for each of the 8 freedoms and 10 advantages. If you find that all these favorable conditions are present, you have what is known as human life endowed with 18 freedom advantages. So congratulate yourself. And here we want to dedicate the marriage. Anybody want to add any more? This is what we learned today. Okay, so we want to dedicate. I think many places mentioned that the teacher. I don't know what happened to my. Why did this line come with it? Please excuse me. So I added one dedication here. Means we never be departed from the teacher. So let's put on palm together and we could read together. In all my lives, may I never be separated from the perfect Lama, and benefit fully from the splendor of the Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of 5 paths and 10 bhumis, and swiftly attain the sublime level of Vajradhara. By this merit, may I attain omniscient Buddhahood and overcome all enemies, the mental afflictions. May I liberate all beings from the ocean samsara and settled by the wave of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Just as the warrior Manjusri attained omniscience and Samatava too, all these merit now are dedicated to train and follow their footsteps. As all the Buddhas, past, present, future, praise this aspiration supreme. So now I dedicate all the roots of virtue for all beings to perfect good action. This is from Samatava's prayer. So this end. Thank you very much for participation. We end by chanting the Vajra mantra. Ahom Penja Kulu Pema Siddhi Hom. Om Ahom Penja Kulu Pema Siddhi Hom. Om Ahom Penja Kulu Pema Siddhi. Okay, thank you. You can open your